To connect our arm together, we're going to add some pegs on here and get those all set up. Now I look at my network view and we see we have these different parts all connected in and some different stuff going on. Not a lot of room to work. On a bigger display I can make this window bigger, but for the purposes of understanding it a little bit more, I am going to add a version of my network to my main window here so I just have some more space to play with. So you can add, by clicking on the arrow, any of the different window tabs to any of the other window tabs. So you can truly customize your workspace. Or if you totally screw up your workspace, you can go under Windows and then you can restore the default workspace and bring it back to factory settings. Now with these layers here, so look at them, if I want to attach some pegs onto these, I don't have to do it one at a time. Now I named my layers to make it a little bit easier so I understand how they're related to each other and what they are. I can highlight them. And at this point, if I'm in my network view, I can hit Command-Shift-P and it will add a peg for each one of those. I could also, in my timeline view down here, I could click on the peg button and it would add in that peg. But I'm going to use the network view, Command-Shift-P, and now it gives me my pegs for each one of these, and now they're doing their little synchronized dance movement here. So they're in Trapper Dancing with the Stars shortly. The advantage of having these different pegs and connecting them together, what we will want to do is watch what happens down here in the timeline. The network view allows us to actually build connections between these different nodes of our project that are actually, at times, it would be impossible to do those kinds of connections by dragging layers around and say, okay, I want this layer to be a child of this one and this and there's times where we're having a layer actually connected to multiple layers, and we can't do that just in the timeline view. And that's really where the network view shines when we're working with Animate Pro, because I can build much more complex riggings. Right now it's going to be a simple one where I say the upper arm is connected to the lower arm is connected to the hand, and now that I've done that, I will notice that inside my drawing view, we'll see this nesting of pegs that has just taken place, where the upper arm is connected to the lower arm is connected to the hand. If I collapse the upper arm, we can see all the layers are a child of upper arm's peg because they all disappear when I click on that arrow, which is now going to give us some control when we go to animate them. Now I only have 3 layers here, and it's not a big deal, but I could move things around, and if this peg's over here and this peg's over here, and when we start getting like 100 layers, which is not actually that hard to do, sometimes our network view gets a little wonked. And one thing that we can do within that network view is the same way that we were able to, in camera view, right-click and choose camera view to get the options to see for where the frames are to set up control points. When I'm in my network view, I have a network view toolbar. And if I click on a bottom node, like display, then we can go over and choose order network up, leave the defaults as they are, hit up, and boom. Now it's organized. When we end up with a really complex character comprised of dozens of layers and dozens of pegs, we can add all this stuff and it'll get messy. Then we can use the order our network, and that will clean things up to make it a little bit easier to see what is actually happening. Now I want to further reinforce this, which is the peg for the upper arm, while it's controlling the upper arm, is also controlling the peg for the lower arm. The peg for the lower arm, while controlling the lower arm artwork, is also controlling the hand's peg. And when I'm in my camera view, we will start to see how all of that can play out. So I'm just going to modify my view here so these pegs are easily accessible. So we'll want that when we start animating. Back in my camera view, I am going to set my pivot points. This registration point or pivot point, which is inside Animate Pro, it's called a pivot point. in most other programs, we think of something as a registration point. But in this instance, where we're moving the arm, it does kind of make sense that it's a pivot point. Remembering pivot points always start at the middle. We use the rotate tool, go over and grab and adjust that pivot point. Now if I go to the lower arm and I can adjust its pivot point, go to the hand, adjust its pivot point. Now that I've done this, I can wiggle the hand. Okay, that works. Now if I go to the lower arms peg, when I wiggle that, we can see how the hand is going with it. If I go to the upper arms peg, all the parts are going with it. So when the upper arm moves, the lower arm and the hand have to move. If they were not connected, so if I did not have that connection between upper arm and lower arm, when I rotate the upper arm, I would get something like this, where the upper arm moves. It's like, whoops, just broke that elbow. Well, that sucks. And in an animation program where we have layers and we can move objects around, if we can't build this network of connections between them, animating a whole character is a huge pain because I have to move one layer at a time. I can move a bunch of things, but I have to keep reorienting each layer in relation to each other layer, the other layers. And that really is just not a fun way to work. But when we have these connections, now when I move it, it now moves together. And that's going to put us into a much better place when it comes time to start animating. Before we start moving the arm, now if you see all of your layers and pegs and other things like that, I recommend first that you collapse everything down to the topmost peg. So you just see one visible layer for what you're working on. Because otherwise, if I want to extend it out, I click on this layer and then hit not F6, F5. Then go to this layer. You know, that's just, why do it the hard way? So if I start here, collapse it, click F6, it extends the whole thing out. I'm going to, would have if I had done it properly. Get rid of any of my keyframes. All right. So with the arm here, click out in time. F5 to extend it out. Then go to frame 1, hit F6, add in a beginning keyframe. If I unclapse, I'll notice, okay, it added a keyframe on every layer. Perfect. And now what I can do is just scrub out in time. Now if you need more than 60 frames for your quick draw McGraw, go nuts. You know, add more frames. Just grab the end of time and stretch it out. If 60 is enough for your person to draw, figure it out. So the arm is at the side. Now we need to draw. So do the rotations and movement of your object. This really is just a rotation exercise. We're not even having to do any translate. So I would recommend you just use the rotation animation tool so you don't accidentally start sliding things all over on the screen. You may want to do a little bit of shoulder lift if you decide, you know, that does fit in, but you can do this very well just using rotation. To build the animation, so at the very end, I want to be something along the lines of having the arm out. But I want it mostly straight, just not all the way straight. So if I'm here and I move down, put a little bend in the elbow, then I'll rotate the hand down a little bit. And we're going to do a little drawing swap at the end on the hand. So now if I'm here, we can see it goes to here. But as I work with this, we're going to fine-tune the ending here a little bit. And now for the beginning, I need to pull the arm before it goes to here. I need to take the upper arm and pull it back, take the forearm, bend it down, rotate the hand a little bit to here. So we're now getting the draw. I'm going to then bend a little bit more now at this point. And then as it goes forward, well, it's going forward, I'm going to start to let the arm straighten so it bends, starts to straighten out, and before we get to the very end point of the drawing or the animation, I want it to be completely extended. Oh, missed. And then it will end. So we get a little snap at the end of the joint. And this is part of when you're building the animation, is to think about everything isn't just moving in a linear motion, but we often overshoot our ending point before we settle in. And it's that little bit of life at the end so that I overshoot and then come back to my resting point that starts to add richness to the animation and makes it look a little less computer. So now I know it's very slow as it goes through, so if I cared about making this more realistic, then we would want to take these keyframes, really pull them back to get a little better sense of timing with it. Now, moving this, we're able to control what is happening through the animation using these keyframes. And remember, you can take your keyframes. It's not uncommon. You add your keyframes, say, every 5 frames or 10 frames apart in the beginning, and just to get the movement down. But then you start tweaking. Well, where is that keyframe? You click on that keyframe and you move it over. So if I wanted that final part here to be really slow, then we'd see it goes really slow. Now, I wouldn't for this particular animation, but there's no reason to say that once you set something that you can't change it. Now that I've gone across here and have the basic animation, now what I'm going to explore is how I can actually do a little bit of drawing substitution on this hand, because I'm going to make it so it's no longer just the hand, but I'm going to let the hand actually turn more into kind of a gun shape to fit with this whole gunslinger motif. So we'll change out what the drawing hand is at this final set of frames, and we'll see how to do that. To add in my drawing substitution, if I click on library and go to the hand, we'll see that the hand currently only has one drawing view. It just has, it's either off or it's this hand. But if I wanted an additional hand view to go along with it, what I could do is right here, when we hit extension, if I wanted to have a different drawing, if I look at my layers, if I go into the hand layer, we have an option to create an empty drawing. If I click there, the hand that was there went away. Now we saw there was hand 1. There's now hand 2. It's waiting for a hand. Now if I turn on onion skinning, at least onion skinning is going to show me kind of approximately what the hand, so I can get an approximate size. So the hand was here. Now it goes away. So it's waiting for this. So now to draw on my next hand, turn off onion skinning, don't need that. So now we can see the hand becomes this pointed hand. And after a few frames here, I can just click here and it switches it back to the previous hand. Now, knowing that I have that hand, I probably should color it as well. It's fill, so it matches. So I now have, I can substitute out which drawing is showing for that layer. Watch it in motion. Now I might want something in between those, kind of a harsh transition between those two. I'm not a big fan of that, so maybe I need a third drawing where it's collapsed, the fingers coming back in. But these are things that you can decide as you build your animation. Now if you think about it, having these different hand shapes, it's going to be like when we start talking characters, we'll have different mouth shapes. But we may also have different eyes for both expressions, but also if a character blinks. So all we do is whenever we want to blink, we just go into the library and on the eye layer, just change it to the blink eye. Boom, now the eye is shut. Then set it back to the non-blink eye when we want it to be the open eye. So we have the flexibility without having to make a lot of additional layers of artwork just to swap things out. And we do that by accessing it either up in the library, and there's a few other places we can do it in the program, but the library is really convenient when you're looking at your timeline and pulling across the animation on it. Oh, wrong view. Turn off light table. I won't get that gray. Now, it might be at this point, maybe I want to add in a visual effect. I could write out the word bang or something like that. And yeah, I could have lots of fun with this as I go. Put the word bang on its own layer, make bang part of the hand so it comes out with it. It animates with the hand and its pivot point. It really is up to you to figure out how you want to build your animation. Now I could bang, and then from this point decide that now it's time. Hit F6 here, and now I can rotate the arm back to a finished position. Now maybe as I rotate it, I may decide to add a little bit of movement in. And as the upper arm drops, the lower arm isn't going to, so if we're here, we'll notice how we break at the elbow to bring the arm down. And then as the arm swings down, let the arm start to straighten. That's too far, I think. Let the arm start to straighten. Yeah, it needs a little bend, otherwise it feels awkward. And we can just add a little bit of overshoot on it here. And then in our finished location, back to here. Straighten it out. Now we can draw, shoot, and then bring the arm back down.